It was expected that Celine Dion's son would follow in her footsteps. He was expected to sing. He was supposed to remain in the music industry. René-Charles, however, had different ideas. At the age of 24, he finally opened up about his covert activities. For years, the family remained silent. His mom was concerned. He would have stunned his late father. However, René-Charles had lost interest in their anxieties. The reason Celine has been so careful of his privacy and why he has been so secretive are explained by what he revealed this year. On March 30, 1968, Celine Dion was born in Charlemagne, a tiny village close to Montreal. Out of 14 children, she was the youngest. Her mother quipped that there wasn't even room for one more spoon because their home was so packed. With 16 individuals living together, the commotion and excitement never subsided. Everything was shared and there was never any luxury or peaceful spot. Celine, one of over 20 mouths to feed, was a baby in a chaotic world. Her family was impoverished, noisy, and crowded, much like most of the people in their neighborhood. Because everyone around them lived the same manner, they were unaware that they were having difficulties, as she subsequently stated. Not even a crib was there to greet her. Her parents put her in a blanket-lined dresser drawer when she got home from the hospital. It wasn't an odd choice. It was all they could do. There was no space for baby furnishings and no money for accessories. The Deans had a lot more children and far less money than the average Canadian family at the time, which was about $6,000. Limitations and difficult decisions defined her early life. Space didn't open up as she grew. It only became more constricted. There were times when Celine had to share a tiny bed with 3 sisters. The house was so crowded that people were sleeping on the couches, the floors, and even the corridors. Girls slept like sardines, cramped together every night, she subsequently claimed. Squeezing in over a few years wasn't enough. It persisted throughout her adolescence. Her family felt like a busy hamlet, whereas the majority of Canadian households were getting smaller. Her father put in a lot of overtime for meager pay as a butcher. Her mother stayed at home, taking care of the house and making clothes out of hand-me-downs and scraps. The family was driven more by survival than by savings. Nevertheless, music was constantly there in the air despite all the difficulties. Her dad was a singer. Even her name was inspired by a song, and her mother was a violinist. In what seemed to be a silent wish that their young girl would one day sing that song, they called her Celine after a French melody they adored. However, the outside world wasn't nice despite all of the love and music at home. Celine was continuously made fun of in school. She stood out from the other children because she was thin and had large teeth. They referred to her as a vampire. Every day, not just occasionally, the teasing took place. Later, Celine claimed that the bullying had left her with permanent scars. She recalled the fear she experienced as she entered the classroom, fully aware of what was ahead. Childhood photos from that era depict a reserved girl who appeared insecure and attempting to blend in. It didn't get any easier when she started performing in public as a teenager. Because of her teeth, local tabloids made fun of her appearance and dubbed her Canine Dion. Despite the fact that she was a child, adult journalists joined in the mockery. Although her singing was garnering attention, her looks was the main focus of the headlines. She had had enough by the time she was 18. She discreetly left, had braces and headgear put on, and returned prepared to be judged on her abilities rather than her appearance. She had never been content at school. To put it simply, "I hated school," she once commented. The bullying wasn't the only issue. She didn't think she was welcome there. Her home was the source of her true education. Her teachers were her siblings. Her classroom was the dinner table. Instead of books or chalkboards, she learned how to sing, perform, and survive from the people in her immediate vicinity. The Dion family persevered when finances were scarce. Literally, they created a band. Every one of the 14 kids participated. They performed at modest venues in Quebec under the name Dion's Family. Celine sung at her parents' piano bar when she was only 5 years old. She wasn't given special treatment. She participated in the deed. She had composed her first song and recorded a demo by the time she was 12 years old. In 1973, she made her stage debut during her brother Michel's wedding. Fun wasn't the only goal here. It was a matter of survival. The shows contributed to revenue. More significantly, they provided Celine with a stage. She felt little on the schoolyard, but safe in the family basement. She refused to get out with pals after school. She would dash home and start making music with her siblings. She took refuge in their basement. It was lively and boisterous, with lots of instruments, singing, and laughs. Celine discovered her voice in that basement. She used it to transform suffering into strength. She fought back against the world that made fun of her with every song she sung. A young girl and her family entered a nearby studio in June 1980. Just enough money had been saved for them to record a demo. She only wrote a few easy tunes with her mother and siblings' assistance. It wasn't fancy. Most children were still learning how to ride a bike at that age. However, this girl was thinking of something else. Music. She unwittingly started a journey that would eventually reach hundreds of millions of people when she sang into a studio microphone that day while surrounded by her family. One day, what began in a kitchen would reverberate throughout stadiums worldwide. Therese, her mother, had faith in more than simply her voice. She put everything on the line. To send the demo to a man named René-Charles, she took out a mortgage on their family home. She picked him because Celine looked up to Jeanette Reno, the most well-known singer in Quebec, whom he managed. However, the family could only afford to send one tape. It would all be over if it ended up in the wrong hands or in the trash. Dion's had 14 children. A baker was their father. This was more than a chance. They had nothing else. And that cassette managed to make it somehow. Rene paid attention. He heard more than a tune. Something he had never heard before came to him. It turned out to be the greatest voice he had ever heard. He reportedly sobbed. Others claimed that he sat silently, in a state of shock. Everyone was astonished by what he did next. To finance her career, he mortgaged his own home, which at the time was worth over $100,000. A 12-year-old girl with no stage experience. He didn't care that his friends said he was insane. He had faith. She was already a rising figure in Quebec by 1983. She had dominated Eurovision by 1988. She had only just begun. It wasn't a big tryout for their first meeting. Rene didn't even have a functioning microphone when the Dion family got there. He remarked, "Pretend you're singing to a full stadium," and gave her a pencil. She made no hesitation. She sung Sinead Conrad as if her life depended on it while holding a pencil. He was hearing things that Rene found unbelievable. He later claimed that she sung as if the audience consisted of 10,000 individuals. That moment determined her future, even though there were actually only a manager and a few family members. Celine put out 9 albums in French between the ages of 13 and 18. The majority of teens were preoccupied with school dances or exams. Hit after hit was being recorded by Celine. She became the first Canadian artist to win a gold record in France at the age of 15. D'amour ou d'amitié was the song. Celine Dion had a secret she was unable to share at the age of 18. She had developed a strong romantic attachment to her 44-year-old manager, René-Charles. Rumors would have been sparked by the age difference alone, but it went beyond that. Sharing a room with her mother, she kept a picture of him beneath her pillow and looked at it every night. She felt physically ill from her obsession. She thought about him in her dreams. She had trouble falling asleep. She was aware that it was not possible. Rene has previously gone through 2 divorces. He could have been her father. Nevertheless, she was powerless to stop herself. The stronger the feelings, the more prohibited it felt. Her mother was the only member of her family to know. Celine's staunchest ally had always been Therese Dion. She was instrumental at the beginning of her career. She had faith in her voice. She was appalled, however, to learn that her adolescent daughter had fallen for a man who was almost 30 years her senior. Rene was more than simply older. Celine has known him since she was 12 years old. Therese thought it was risky, even careless. Presumably hoping the fad would end, she went up to Celine. However, Celine did not retreat, instead, she held her ground. "We live in a free country," she informed her mother. "I am free to love whoever I choose." She was fighting for more than just her emotions. She was battling for her freedom. She also had no intention of letting anyone stop her. Everything changed when she turned 19 a year later. A covert crush turned into a committed partnership. Their first formal date was discreet and unnoticed by the public. Rene kept their romance a secret for years. Only family members and close friends were aware. They exercised caution. They were aware that they would be judged. However, they were prepared to wait because their love was genuine. In plain sight, they concealed. Although he remained her mentor and manager, their relationship continued to deepen behind the scenes. Made a startling choice while she was at the height of her early fame. For 18 months, she was out of the public eye. There was no scandal. There was a plan. She altered her hair, capped her teeth, and became fluent in English. She no longer desired to be a child star. She aspired to be worldwide. When she returned from the sabbatical, which started in late 1986, she had radically changed. Her image altered, and the world noticed, but her voice remained the same. The night that transformed her life then arrived. Celine Dion won the Eurovision Song Contest on April 30, 1988, in front of over 600 million viewers. She was barely 20. It was an electrifying performance. It didn't matter that she sang for Switzerland rather than Canada. Switzerland defeated the UK by a single point, 137 to 136, when the final ballots were counted. She became instantly well known throughout Europe after that close victory. The final French-language song to win the competition was Ne partez pas sans moi. And Celine, a timid Quebec teen, rose to fame on the continent. She took her greatest leap to date in 1990. Everything changed with Unison, her debut album in English. It earned platinum and sold more than 1.2 million copies in the US. It received 7 platinum certifications in Canada. For an almost unknown French-speaking musician, the hit tune Where Does My Heart Beat Now peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Celine, however, made it appear natural. She won the Juno Awards for Female Vocalist of the Year and Album of the Year for the album. She was more than just a Canadian celebrity. She was rapidly making her debut in the international pop scene. That same year, she had her first significant appearance on American television on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Leno looked directly into the camera after seeing her perform live and said she will have a remarkable career. It was an important occasion. Such a statement regarding a new French-Canadian performer had never been made before. And yet, as it happened, it was perfect. She was able to access opportunities across the United States because to that one TV exposure. The Wall Street Journal, which typically covers business and finance, labeled her a once-in-a-generation voice 2 years later. Even her team was taken aback by the amount of recognition from such a reputable source. People stopped comparing her to pop stars. Legends were being grouped with her. Her powerful and memorable voice had become her trademark, and reviewers were finally recognizing her for what she was. Then came her 24th birthday on the evening of March 30, 1992. Celine and Peabo Bryson performed Beauty and the Beast on the Academy Awards stage. The song had recently won a Grammy and an Oscar. In front of the biggest stars in Hollywood, she performed it live, and her performance stole the event. She released her next English-language CD that same evening. There was an immediate buzz. She returned to The Tonight Show within a day. At that point, everyone was in agreement. It was what Jay Leno had predicted. Celine Dion shocked the nation by being married live on national television on December 17, 1994. At the Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal, millions of Canadians watched her walk down the aisle. She was just 26 years old, and she was wearing a 7-pound tiara and a silk gown with a 20-foot train. The chapel, decked out with over 10,000 fresh flowers, was packed with more than 500 visitors. The fact that it was the first time Celine and René-Charles made their romance public made it much more emotional. Their courtship had been kept under wraps until that point, and he was 26 years older than her. However, life wasn't easy following their wedding. She endured years of anguish while trying to conceive, even as her music career continued to soar. She began fertility treatments in her early 30s and continued them for almost 10 years. When Rene received a throat cancer diagnosis in 1999, things got much more difficult. His sperm were frozen before therapy started, but the physicians quickly discovered that his sperm count was already low. Natural conception was nearly impossible. They underwent at least 7 IVF cycles. They all suffered, both mentally and physically. In addition, they miscarried. Despite being one of the most well-known vocalists in the world, Celine kept these traumatic events to herself. It seemed like a silent miracle when she eventually gave birth. She took a plane to New York in May 2000 to undergo 2 surgeries at a prestigious reproductive center. The interval between the operations was only 4 days. After that, according to her team, she needed to rest for at least 10 days. She put her work on hold entirely in order to concentrate on having a child. She was under a lot of pressure, both from her own aspirations and the media. Nevertheless, she continued. Then, their son was born in Florida on January 25, 2001. He was given the name René-Charles. He was 3 weeks ahead of schedule and weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Celine was 33. The entire world joined her in celebrating. It felt like the right moment after years of disappointment and grief. For 3 whole years, she avoided the limelight in order to devote herself to her new family. The conclusion wasn't entirely pleasant. It demonstrated the power of patience and hope. However, it was not the end of the story. Celine said something few anticipated in an interview in 2001. Another embryo was produced during the IVF process for René-Charles, but it was still frozen. She claimed that because of her strong attachment to it, she couldn't bear to let it go unused. Nearly 9 years passed while that embryo remained frozen. It then assisted in the birth of her twin boys in 2010. She had the opportunity to grow her family once more thanks to the same science that made her a mother. Celine was already one of the world's top music performers long before any of this. She published Falling Into You in 1996. Everything changed with the album. Over 32 million copies were sold worldwide. It sold roughly 12 million units in the US. Another 2.1 million were added by the UK. Not only was it a bestseller. In 1997, it took home the Grammy for Album of the Year. It outperformed Beck's and the Beatles' albums. Sales in France, Germany, Canada, and Australia all surpassed 1 million. Songs like Because You Loved Me and It's All Coming Back to Me Now are still popular 25 years later. Those tunes alone sold millions of copies. The song No One Could Escape then started. Her career's biggest hit was My Heart Will Go On, which was released in 1997 for the Titanic movie. 18 million physical copies had been sold by 1998. In more than 20 nations, it was the top-ranked item. It spent 17 weeks at the top of the Eurochart's Hot 100 in Europe. Together, Germany, France, and the UK produced more than 4.6 million hard copies. Its radio play set a record at the time, reaching 117 million listeners in a single month in the US. It is still streamed hundreds of millions of times annually. It is still being discovered by an entirely new generation. There was more to this triumph than a single song or album. Celine became the first female artist to sell over 30 million copies of 2 albums. 32 million copies of Falling Into You were sold. The 1997 release Let's Talk About Love came in second with 31 million. That has never been done by any other female artist. These were also long-lasting hits. They spent months on international charts. They reached previously unthinkable heights with the aid of songs like My Heart Will Go On. She altered the course of Las Vegas's future in 2003. 4. Caesar's Palace constructed a $95 million arena. It had 4,300 seats and was known as the Coliseum. Vegas was formerly thought to be a last resort for waning celebrities. Celine, however, disagreed. She sold over 3 million tickets in 5 years and took home more than $385 million. Other well-known celebrities, like Lady Gaga, Britney Spears, and Elton John, followed her example as a result of her success. What started with her became the model for contemporary homes in Vegas. The romance between Celine Dion and René-Charles was unique. Behind the lights, music, and celebrity, however, they fought a secret war for 17 agonizing years. In April 1998, René received her initial diagnosis of throat cancer. He persevered through treatment and surgery, recovering in what medical professionals described as a miraculous way. However, the cancer returned, and further tumors surfaced in December of 2013. Although it was taken out, the damage was already done. René was no longer able to eat. A tube was required to feed him. Frequently took care of it herself, looking after him in between practices and shows. René continued to be active in her job, though. He influenced her globe tours and Las Vegas performances even though he was mute. Celine abandoned everything every time his cancer returned. She postponed a scheduled Asian tour and her Las Vegas performances in August 2014. These choices weren't trivial. She never hesitated, even when they cost millions. She expressed her desire to use all of her energies to support her husband's recovery. She startled everyone by stepping away from the spotlight in early 2000, when she was just 32 years old and among the best-selling artists in the world. In addition to helping René heal, she took a 2-year hiatus to establish a family. It came directly from the heart and was an uncommon move in the music industry. It was a wise choice. At 42, Celine gave birth to twins in October 2010. Nelson and Eddie were their names. However, the trip there wasn't simple. She underwent 6 IVF cycles. She miscarried once. The twins were produced from embryos that had been preserved for years. Each infant weighed little more than 5 pounds. The names of the two were Celine's longtime producer Eddie Marnay and Nelson Mandela, respectively. It seemed miraculous. He and Celine continued to be partners despite René's deteriorating health. They collaborated on her Las Vegas residency. At the age of 73, René passed away in January 2016. She was providing for him on her own throughout the last few months. Even though he was no longer her manager, he remained the driving force behind her success. As she had promised, she remained by his side all the way to the end. I Am Celine Dion, a documentary released in 2024, showed viewers a hitherto undiscovered aspect of her life. During a recording session, cameras caught her having a seizure at one eerie moment. Her entire body tensed. She groaned in agony. She was immobile and unable to talk for about 8 minutes. In an attempt to keep her conscious, her medical team had to take quick action and administer 2 doses of emergency nasal spray. Celine demanded that they continue filming even if the director wanted to stop. She wanted others to understand the true nature of living with her condition. The world was stunned to learn of Celine's illness. She suffered from SPS, or stiff person syndrome. In 1 million people, just 1 or 2 have it. Muscle spasms caused by the condition can be brought on by touch, sound, or even emotion. It can cause spinal injury, distort the body, and impair walking. No remedy exists. Benzodiazepines and injections of botulinum toxin are frequently used as forms of treatment. After years of perplexing symptoms, Celine finally received a diagnosis. Only until the epidemic allowed her to finally pause and concentrate on her health did doctors discover it. She had kept her condition a secret from the world until then. She continued to perform despite her discomfort and vocal difficulties. In 1 year, she performed in as many as 70 shows. She was maintaining appearances, testing various treatments, and consulting with doctors behind the scenes. She almost broke pretending everything was all right, but she didn't want to disappoint her fans. Her illness wasn't confirmed by doctors until August 2022. She was honest with her fans in December. At last, the burden of concealing it was lifted. Her care team now includes her sons. Even though Nelson and Eddie are just 14 years old, Celine has taught them how to recognize crisis warning signs. They are skilled in swaying her. They are able to activate panic buttons located throughout the house. They are aware of when to seek assistance. They practice drills every night. Even if she's taking too long to get ready for bed, they check on her. They manage it with affection, even though it's a duty no child should have. Celine still feels him even if Rene is no longer there. She claimed in 2021 that she frequently feels his presence. She talks to him when things get difficult. In the darkest hours of her illness, she senses his presence. He served as her best friend, manager, and spouse. She has never lost that closeness. The world has acknowledged Celine's strength. She was awarded the Legion of Accolade, France's highest civilian accolade, on May 22, 2008. She received it in the Élysée Palace from President Nicolas Sarkozy. It is rarely given to foreigners. She was the most popular French-language singer of all time by that point, having sold over 12 million copies of her album, Do. She was ranked as the 10th best Canadian musician of all time by Rolling Stone in 2023. Legends like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell were just ahead of her. No other Canadian solo female pop performer achieved a higher ranking. Decades after her initial hit songs, she received acclaim, demonstrating that her influence has endured despite all industry trends and changes. René-Charles, her oldest son, is leaving his imprint. At the age of 24, he has achieved success in two quite distinct fields. He released a hip-hop EP in 2021. He stunned the poker world by making it far into the World Series of Poker main event in July 2025. He advanced to Day 5 with 2.8 million chips out of over 9,700 players. He demonstrated that poker's skill runs in the family and made almost $70,000. Rene, his father, had been a serious player as well. With music in one hand and cards in the other, René-Charles is now carrying on that tradition.